Welcome to With You Podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you? Coming down from your baseball high?
Oh, man, it was so good. So, that's my sacred space.
Yeah.
Church should be. And then baseball fields are my second. The kids took me to a baseball game last night. The results weren't too pleasing, but man, 5 hours of sitting in a stadium makes me really happy. And you know why it's 5 hours? Because I make the kids get there 2 hours ahead of time so we can be first in the gate.
Yeah, you sent a picture and it looked like you guys were the only people in the stadium.
Well, it happened to be thunderstorms too. So.
Yeah, that's true. That was discouraging.
Man, the drive was exciting. So I got to be chauffeured around because I sat in the back and my phone started beeping saying, warning, flash floods ahead.
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, sure. We're in Chicago. There's no flash floods happening in Chicago. The underpasses.
Yeah.
Full up to like mid-tire. So, but our son is.
You're going to say mid-car. You shouldn't be driving through that.
No, but our son did a fabulous job driving. But it was exciting. So pregame exciting, game exciting, drive home not so exciting.
Yeah, score not exciting.
Yeah. So what did you do while I was at a baseball game?
I hung out with friends.
Oh, how nice!
We had a ladies' night with moms and daughters. It was really fun.
Oh, what'd you talk about?
That's just
It's personal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Girl stuff.
I kind of always want to be at a girls'
I
night.
know. You're always jealous when the ladies hang out.
I'm so curious because guys' night, we don't talk about anything substantive. It's just really kind of body humor and movie quotes.
And
I
I don't think we did any of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think I could get invited to a girls' night sometime?
I mean, I think you're always welcome.
Really?
Well, I mean, it was like wedding talk. One of our daughter's friends and our friend is getting married in a month. And so there's a lot of wedding talk and dress talk. And
I'm all about not the dress talk.
And just update. We hadn't seen each other for a while. So it was updating on what our daughter's about to do this fall and just, life stuff.
I get excited about weddings though. Because
do
I do. I do. Because it's just like the kickoff of the college orientation. Going to a wedding kind of reminds me about what this is all about, what our relationship is about. It's kind of a reset of like, oh yeah, this is what we're committing to. Yeah. And I love it. And I get, just like rom-coms, I get emotional at baseball fields, at weddings, and at romantic comedy movies. I just tear up. I have a problem.
If that's a problem, I guess.
I'm sure there's a support group for it.
So do you get teary when we talk about birth stories?
Yes, but for different
Totally
reasons.
Different. Because I was thinking, did that come up? Because that would be a good segue because we will be talking about processing our birth stories.
Yeah. Should we give an adult rating to this one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. This is normal life stuff. It won't be explicit.
Oh.
But we did.
Bummer.
I was thinking, did we even talk about birth last night with all the women? It did come up because the friend who's getting married, I was with her mom when she was in labor with her. And so it just brings, those memories never go away. We were kind of all getting emotional about how we'd all been with each other at those times in life. When she was walking around the neighborhood in labor with her first child and she was asking me questions. I wasn't her doula at that time. I wasn't a doula, I don't think, but I was still her companion in labor. And so
and this is her first, right?
This is her first
child, first getting married. Yeah, no, I think of the birth stories. I think it's different for men and women.
Oh, yeah. Very. For a lot of reasons.
But I think it's important.
It is.
And I know you are committed to helping dads and partners really kind of navigate their story in it because it tends to be a minor story within the larger, which appropriately, right? I mean,
yes, but it's also a life event for a man, in different ways, but like a core memory.
Yeah.
and part of an identity forming thing.
And I think it's been changing generationally. Like my dad hung out at the nurses station and just kind of was having fun talking to people during the birth process and didn't see anything. It was
Yeah.
kind of like,
So you're saying the dad's involvement is different
yeah,
now,
and I think
and
that changed,
culturally as well.
and I think that changes the story. Yeah.
Oh, for
So
sure. Yes.
because we have a friend who
Yeah.
lives in a country where the mortality rate, the maternal mortality rate was about 50%. So it's a 50-50 chance your wife is going to come out of that process alive. Well, that's a different experience
Yeah.
than here in the US,
Yeah.
where we don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. So often when people, I mean,
Did we jump too far ahead
no,
again?
we didn't.
Okay.
And no, I mean, because this is where we're going, but the whole purpose of this is because this topic of birth story processing is because it's one of those life things. We say we believe in life transitions. That's one of the things we focus on. There can't be a more pivotal life transition moment than giving birth
Yeah.
and going into, standing on the threshold of parenthood and then being on the other side, and the sort of hero's journey, some call it, to
Oh,
get to
wow.
the other
Okay.
side. So it is a big life moment, and it has a lot of consequences for what we believe about ourselves, and the way our bodies hold memories and how that affects us later in life.
I'm excited about this because this is not a conversation we typically have at the dinner table
No.
or on a date, and this is what you do for a living. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'll probably jump in because
Yeah, I want you to. So I've given this presentation several times at new moms groups, and actually just recently at a conference of people from all over Europe who I got to hear some interesting stories. And I call it finding the strength in your birth journey, because it's about the importance of processing these life event stories in a way that highlights our strengths and doesn't focus on what was really hard or traumatic and get stuck there.
Oh, I love that, because even before you started doing this for a living, you would kind of help shape people's story, or at least your story of like, oh, when you were pregnant, everyone came up and told you like the worst stories, like the painful parts of so they would only select the painful moments that they remember, which isn't super great for a new mom that doesn't know what's going to happen. Of the only story you hear is the negative and the painful.
Yeah. That as soon as people see a pregnant belly, they want to tell you the worst of the worst stories.
Why is that?
Why is that? Exactly. And I mean, I think we will talk about that. But when I do this presentation, the first thing I ask people in a group of people who usually are new parents in this context, although sometimes, I did most recently when I did this presentation, I think the most recent birth that happened for those women was 14 years ago. So, and still the memories were highly focused and very memorable.
Yeah, you talk about core memories.
Yeah.
Those are core memory kind of pieces.
So I ask people to first say, give me one word for your experience of birth. And maybe you can do this too.
Okay.
Because you were present for all 4 of our children's births.
One word?
Well,
I have lots of one words.
I know. There's lots of words that could come up, but it's very interesting to see what word comes to the surface.
Yeah.
So for you, what would it be?
It was fascinating. Like seeing I love the human body, what it can do. And so seeing what your body was doing was fascinating, to the point where I'm like, you should see this. And you were
one of my core memories is your eyes so wide in your face, like, wow.
It was remarkable. And I guess the remarkable or the fascinating part is knowing I would never have anything like that happen to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm not capable of that, which is just like, that also made it really fascinating because it was outside of my body.
Yeah.
So that was the first word of just
fascinating.
The second one was exhausting. And it wasn't exhausting thinking about you. It was exhausting thinking about me.
I know.
Because I fell asleep for 24 hours.
After our first one.
Yeah.
That was a long haul, the first one. But I mean, it's hard to be the support person. And so many partners feel a lot of relief when I even just say that, because
Yeah.
usually the support people are told, you're not doing it. Like, there's no reason for you to complain about being hungry, tired, thirsty,
Yeah.
stressed, afraid, whatever, because
Yeah.
your body's not doing it. But I think it's really hard to be the one that has no control over what's going on and to just witness
Yeah.
that it's emotionally difficult, and it can be physically exhausting because often there's lack of sleep for a long time, and a lot of emotional ups and downs.
Yeah. And seeing someone you love in pain and not being able to do, I mean, the empathy part of that's hard. But it's interesting that you say that, because I feel, and this might just be me, but I feel like my story, part of the birth story, you've embraced. But lots of times when we're with other couples, women especially get really reactive when I start talking about my experience. There's a
Yeah.
shutting down of the partner's stories.
Yeah.
There's a shutting down of, like, you have no right. And it's just like, oh, my experience, my story isn't welcome
Yeah.
in part of the
It gets
birth story.
discounted, but
And
it
I understand
matters.
why. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. It's a bystander story, but yet it's with people I love, and I'm an ancillary part, but it's my experience. And so it's really interesting that you've been good at kind of folding that in, and it is a long side part of the story and not the central story. But
Yeah, and similarly, women's experience can be discounted if it doesn't match somebody else's or if it's in comparison. So that's part of the struggle with women being able to process their birth story.
yeah,
So, you said fascinating and exhausting.
yeah,
A lot of the words that come up, you can imagine. Pain is often one of the first ones. Painful or unknown, or,
yeah. Taking your
the
front lip, pulling it over the top of your
no,
head.
no, we don't need any of those visuals. This
Okay.
is a word.
Oh, that's right.
So it's often helplessness, like those sorts of
Yeah,
feelings. Those are
yeah.
usually the words that come up,
Mm,
even for people who had a rather relatively uncomplicated birth. Those things rise to the surface.
hmm.
So, we have to acknowledge first that birth is one of the most challenging things we can go through as a human.
Yeah,
Even in a straightforward birth, there's a lot going on with the body, and a lot that has to happen between the baby and the mother's body that brings the baby out. And sometimes, in our country, almost a third of babies are born surgically. So there's, sometimes major surgery going on. Sometimes it was unplanned. So there's the stress of that, that change of plans. So there's a lot of challenges
yeah.
involved. It's
Well,
a,
even that, it makes it sound like it's a medical issue rather than a human development issue.
yeah.
That the words you're using and the amount of medical intervention, which, praise God, it reduces maternal mortality, but it also shifts the view of the story.
Yes, that's a whole other conversation we could have of how birth has changed from happening as sort of a natural life event into a medically managed situation that's really changed our view of it too.
Yeah,
That's a whole other conversation, but it's one of the challenges of that is navigating the system that
yeah,
we're in that supports us giving birth,
yeah.
or that adds complications
Hmm.
to our idea of birth.
Well, and the system shapes the story.
Yeah.
The system creates the trajectory of the story. This is where I can add my little part. I
I
can
know.
add.
No, I'm totally on board with that. But, the fact that it's such a hard thing and that it's like a life-changing thing going from, not being a parent to welcoming a whole new human,
Yeah.
um, it's an initiation. It's kind of an
Mm,
initiation into a next stage of life. It's one of the few things we have left in our society that's a true ritual and a true initiation into a new stage of life.
yeah.
So it's important. It's a really important time. And it's one of the reasons it makes it so core and so identity forming to who we are. So that's kind of one of the reasons I think birth stories are important.
Hmm.
They become a core memory, and a core memory is at its essence something that's, it's an influential experience that ends up shaping who we are and how we view the world.
Yeah.
So it's not just one thing that happens. It's like not just like, oh, I remember that time I went to the beach when I was 5. It's like it becomes a part of me and my identity and how I see the world and how I see people around me. It becomes a building block of my behavior
Yeah.
later in life. And this is really cool too. They've done studies. I think we know this because, if I get in any group of women, people just want to tell me their birth story when
Yeah.
they hear what I do.
Yeah.
Just women want to tell their birth story. And it doesn't matter how long ago they gave birth.
Right.
And one really cool thing that shows that this is like a lifelong memory is a study done by Penny Simkin,
Mm-hmm.
who I have a lot of her books. You've seen her stuff around. Anytime she spoke, I went to see her. She passed away recently, but she's kind of the OG doula guru leader, like
Yeah.
really wrote a lot and studied a lot about birth and kind of coined the idea of a doula as a birth companion being an integral part of a positive birth experience.
Yeah.
And she was a childbirth educator. And she would have people in her class just write down their birth story. After they had the baby, they would write it down and send it to her, and she kept them. And she'd been doing this for decades. And so she got this idea that she wanted to see the women that had written their birth story, let's say 30 years ago, if she asked them to write it down again and compared the two,
Yeah.
how much would have changed over those 30 years or however long it was. And she tracked people down that had been in her class. She had them do that. Just write down your birth story for me. She compared them and they were remarkably alike,
Oh, really? So
like
they didn't change,
they
the narrative didn't change much.
yeah, it just what they remembered even as women in their 70s or in later in life, it was just remarkably the same as when they had told it before.
Hmm.
And she showed that even women who kind of are in later stages of dementia even could still tell you the stories of the births of their children.
Hmm.
So it just shows how it remains with you and becomes part of who you are, and becomes a rite of passage.
Yeah. I have so many questions of Penny. I'm sad that I
I
can't ask
know.
because it's like if you did things like the storytelling, your experience you're going to talk about, does that give new meaning to the core memory that then carries on, or is it the first story that is the one that sticks? I mean, that's a question that I
Hmm.
have. I have a lot more, but I want to hear more about. So you, in doing this, the core part of that, you're helping women tell in a new way. What's the importance of telling it?
Yeah. So the thing about a story, and I also follow, there's something called birth story medicine that's by the same people who do not evidence-based birth. Birthing from Within is a book that I really like. And the
Okay.
people that are involved with that have created this whole modality called birth story medicine. And it talks about stories as a living entity. So rather than being static, like those ones were kind of didn't change much, it is a living entity
Hmm.
that changes over time, and the events themselves don't carry the meaning.
Yeah.
We create the meaning, we attach the meaning to the things that happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that part can change.
So the telling of,
So
yeah.
what happened to me in my first birth and the hard parts of back labor or whatever, right after it happened, I could tell one story about what that meant. Maybe I said, "Oh, my body's not capable of giving birth quickly like other people," or whatever it
Mhm.
was that I attached to that. Years down the road, I might say, I might have a different meaning attached to
Yeah.
that experience.
Well, and those meanings can be provided to you because I think
Yes.
of like medical providers, nursing
Yes.
staff, they can say things that shape that experience in the moment that is continuing. I know you've talked about that. Something happening in the conversation in the birth room a year later, that story is being retold in the parenting about the child, about the mother.
Yes, other people's interpretation of what's going on when it's
Yeah.
verbalized becomes part woven into our story.
Yeah.
And that's why I take it really seriously what I say in the birth room,
Yeah.
because I do see that. I see professionals who are trying to just make light of things
Yeah,
or
be
be
playful.
playful, but they're attaching a personality trait to the baby or something that I see repeated
Yeah,
and becomes part of the baby's story
right.
when, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that's so important, whether we're talking about birth stories or our marriages or our
mhm.
dating relationships or our church, of like a nurse saying, "Oh, baby's being stubborn."
Yeah.
And then that stubborn label and language, we tend to live out that
Mhm.
story. It makes me think about what are the things that I say that are shaping our relationship or shaping my experience in church that foster a
Yeah.
certain response and then continues to reinforce that in a trajectory.
Yeah, and you don't even know you're carrying it with you.
Right.
Sometimes it takes ages to disentangle
Hmm.
those things that came from somewhere else that become part of the meaning. I hear things said all the time like, "Oh, stop, don't make a big fuss. This part isn't even the hard part. You haven't even got to the hard part yet." Like,
Right.
and then you
Discounting.
take that to yourself like, I have a terrible pain tolerance or I can't handle hard things, and that becomes part of what you believe
Yeah.
about yourself.
Yeah.
And it was just an offhand comment by a tired nurse,
Right. That has
you know?
seen multiple births, but it's not a soothing. It's actually increasing anxiety and increasing a story that you might live into.
Right, right.
So this idea of story in with the birth is something that can be applied to all of us. But you really kind of spend a lot of time talking with new moms, old moms, of retelling their story or reassessing their story to foster strength,
Yeah,
to foster.
that I feel passionate about that. And, part of the tenet of that birth story medicine
Mhm.
modality is that birth is a hero's journey. It's like, you have this thing you have to accomplish that's this challenging quest that you go and have to work through and encounter the dragons and whatever.
Yeah.
And you come to the end of it, you meet the goal, and then you're in a new land.
Mm.
And you return to yourself. And they say that part of that return needs to be a formal telling of that story. It's like you've got to have witnesses. You've got to tell it to sort of process what happened to you.
Sure. You return home and you retell
Yeah,
the
this
adventure.
is what happened, and that's one of the cool. It gives me chills to think about it. It's one of the cool things about getting to be a witness at births is no matter how the birth goes down, there's always this moment right after the baby's born, and the woman is still just kind of like it's just there's a lot going on in the room. There's a lot of noises. There's a lot of chaos. But I see this moment when the woman looks at the witness. She either looks at her partner
Hmm.
and they look at each other and it's like, did you just see that? Or they look at me and go like, can you believe I just did that?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's beautiful
Yeah.
because it's like in that moment, they're like, I just did something I didn't know I could do.
Mm.
And that's, yeah.
I love seeing how it touches a deep part of you too. This isn't just an idea or a technique. It's really the essence of human connection, that in those moments there's like wanting to share a core part of who they are with you and their partner.
Yeah.
Um,
And at the same time, it's when a really hard thing happens too. And somebody looks to you and says, did you witness that?
yeah, did you
Like
see it?
there's just we need that connection in those moments. And so we tell the stories. And I find this interesting, when I give the presentation and everybody really relates to this, like starting with, there's lots of ways to tell our story.
Yeah.
And there's ways that are inappropriate to tell our story. Like if I'm at a dinner party with you and I and our friends,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell the long version with all the gritty details of of the births of my children,
Right.
right? That people can't handle that, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to get a response that's going to be helpful to me.
No, unless it's shock and awe.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
want to shock people,
yeah.
that
That's
that's
not the goal.
that's not your jam.
No. So, we all kind of craft a social story.
Yeah.
So everybody has a social story that's just, oh, oh, you had a baby a month ago. How did it go?
Mhm.
Oh, it went fine. It took 3 hours. Whatever it is. There's this short version elevator pitch
Yeah.
story that's appropriate for acquaintances and, people we're not going to spend a lot of time with.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes our friends too, who might not be able to handle the full truth.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has that social story. And that one I think perpetuates because you tell it in small gatherings of people who are sharing those stories. And it just is like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I had,
It's a layer of intimacy.
the
I
baby
think,
came out, he was 10 pounds. Everybody goes,
yeah,
oh, and
all the
that's all.
facts.
Yeah, that's all you need to know.
Well, and it's layers of intimacy, right? Like a
Mhm.
social party is a top layer, surface layer kind of story. But if someone's going through something difficult, you might change the story to the deeper
Yeah,
experiences and meaning because it's more intimate.
right. And I think that's appropriate with almost anything we're sharing with people too. Like some people make the mistake of when somebody says, "Oh, tell me about it." You have to know the appropriate, circles
I
for
feel
the
like this
appropriate
is
level.
an important message for me
Yeah,
because occasionally I like being in that inappropriate conversation level for the topic.
I think you do that consciously though.
I do. Well, like at our one of our children's after the rehearsal dinner, we were sitting on a patio, and I knew you like talking about birth stories, so I was messing with the younger kids of like, wouldn't it be fascinating if parents would tell you the conception story? And then my mom came by and went and did it.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so,
Yes.
but
So,
that's an example
well,
of
sort of.
a
Yes.
problem
That's an example of
me and mom
of
being
you
inappropriate.
trying to use the shock and awe approach to yeah. But I guess I'm talking more about sharing anything that's personal from our lives because this is about birth stories, but it's you can extrapolate that to almost anything. There are certain circles where it's the right time and place
Yeah.
to really go deeper and for people to be able to listen and to reflect in a way that's helpful. And there's times where it can be really harmful
Yeah.
to tell something really intimate or that you're really struggling with or still trying to process and getting a response that also discounts it or minimizes it or interprets it in a way that's not helpful. So I think we have to be careful.
Yeah. Because in therapy, we have in one of the approaches, it's called the displacement story. If the story is too hard between us, we tell a story that's kind of meaningful, but not our story, that gives space to hear it at a level of intimacy that's more comfortable. And so it can be, oh, this reminds me of something, or even telling our story in the level that we tell it can be a help. But we have to be thinking about it that way and not just telling to tell or telling for shock and awe, but telling for growth together and kind of a ritual or a rite of passage type of.
Well, and I think that's what we're moving towards with this idea of processing your birth story in a way that brings growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's understanding that there's different times and places for different levels of this story. And like we start with our social story. I think what a lot of people move to next is the commiseration story, where we group ourselves by people who have had similar experiences. There might be the people who are like, yeah, I'm not that person that has the home water birth. I had C-sections and I'm proud of it. And so, you join with other people who are like, yeah, that stuff's crazy. That's not the way we're going to do it. We like to schedule it. There might be other people who went through a really difficult journey of trying to go unmedicated and then had lots of interventions and lots of pain. And so they might group themselves with people who go, yeah, I get that. Like, it's crazy painful and I wasn't able to do without an epidural. Why did people do it without an epidural anyway? And you then you sort of start to one up each other, Oh, my labor was 25 hours. Oh, hers was 36 hours. And, it becomes a like badge of honor to have gone through something difficult and to find people who share that experience.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was wondering where that competitive storytelling fit. It's in the commiseration.
I think
section.
so. Yeah, because and that's where we can do harm to each other, I think, because I see that with women, especially women who had a rather uncomplicated birth.
Yeah.
they surprisingly are the ones who feel like they can't tell their story because people say, lucky you, but mine wasn't like that. I don't want to hear it
Yeah.
because that makes me feel bad about my story. And we can't just hear each other's stories for what they are without that comparison.
Right. And it sounds like the story in and of itself isn't an
Inherently?
inherently meaning rich thing. It's the process of telling it that gives the meaning.
Yeah.
And so part of that it can be changed, it can be influenced in slightly different ways to retell it, to move in these types of stories. So you have the social story, that light layer, and then the word I can't say.
The commiseration.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. The competition,
Are
the
there
comparison. And
are there
then,
others?
yeah, well, and I think that moves very smoothly into identity because now you're grouping yourself with, and that comes from words people say sometimes too. I hear even medical providers saying, oh, you're just one of those people who never goes into labor. And, so they'll take that on as an identity. Like my body doesn't work. My mom didn't go into labor either. I never, my babies just never decide to come. It becomes an identity thing that we attach meaning to and extrapolate it to different areas of life.
Yeah. Do you think people tell, like if they've had multiple births, they tell all the birth stories in the same way because it's anchored in an identity? Like your stories, you've had 4 babies.
Yeah.
Do you tell the story the same way for each one that's anchored in an identity, or?
I mean, that's a hard question because I tell the stories differently. But I think there's an underlying identity that kind of threads through all of them.
Yeah.
About, I think my probably underlying thread is that I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I would have made some decisions differently, but I did the best with reading the books that we had and going to our hospital class and listening to my doctors, but I definitely would have made a different decision. So what I had to unravel later was why couldn't I stand up when I knew I didn't want that choice?
Yeah.
Because something inside me said, I don't want that choice, but the doctor says, for XYZ reasons, we're doing this. And you go along with it because you
Comply,
trust. And I think trusting the people in our healthcare is important.
Yeah.
But sometimes we don't have all the information until later.
Yeah. And having a voice of, like, I think it goes to some societal things. Women have been trained to defer.
And not to make a fuss.
And not to make a fuss, and to doubt, not listening to your body,
Yeah.
and defer to authority. And that kind of coalesces with what you're saying of
Yeah.
like the societal forces coalesce in how you navigate your birth story in the moment,
Right.
which is different than looking back at it.
Right. And they are definitely intertwined. So then where we're going, like the next stage of this whole storytelling thing is the quest. So this is more like that search for meaning. It's like, okay, what did happen? Let's unpack what happened.
Yeah.
But then let's go further into why did it happen? And then what's the meaning behind it?
Yeah.
And then the story is flipping from just the external list of events to the internal, like, what does that say about me and who I am becoming? So it's a much deeper storytelling process. And that's why we kind of need some help doing that. There's a lot of reflection you can do, but you're still bumping up against your own, I don't know, thoughts and limitations.
Yeah, it's
in
like
your
you
thoughts.
said, how do you know what you don't know? If there's not an observer or a facilitator, you're limited with your own internal experience and story, that there's not shaped to tell something slightly different that might be just as true.
Right. And we can be really easily shaped by people's external, meaning making
Yeah.
attempts. So we have to be careful who is involved in that process
Yeah.
of that storytelling because they can shape it. And, we easily go into talking about trauma when we talk about birth stories because there's obviously a challenge for everybody, but for a lot of people, it turns into trauma.
Yeah.
And, the study, it's hard to say for sure, but the studies, at least of American women who've given birth say close to half of people who've given birth say that there's trauma involved, true trauma.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
It is a lot, and true trauma. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard. Tongue twister. True trauma is a challenging thing because it's a neurological thing, not just a uncomfortable or I think sometimes we overuse the word trauma in our society of something I don't like or didn't expect. I say that was traumatic, where it's really how it affects us neurologically, and ideas of like a window of tolerance, a place that we can function with things that are difficult. And then when we fall out of our window in terms of neurological hyperarousal, where we get aggressive or activated, or hypoarousal, where we get shut down, depressed, dissociate. So when we're talking about that 50%, that's the falling out of the windows in terms of neurological and physiological response.
Yeah. So what does that look like?
So I think sometimes in birth, you can see women that just dissociate from their body. They're not aware of what's happening, whether it was pregnancy from a traumatic event or the actual birth process being traumatic by people involved or their own past getting kind of reminded,
activated
from the experience. So thinking about if I've had adverse relational sexual trauma, then when things are putting pressure in the pelvic floor, all of that's going to affect my neurochemistry to say it's a threat. And I'm either going to shut down or get angry, swear, grab and throw things.
Well, I mean, I observe that when I'm with people in birth, and this is one way women compare themselves to each other. They might hear that somebody had a similar unfolding of events in their birth, and they describe it as a wonderful birth. It went so well. And another person has the same kind of things happen, but the way they handle it is very different. Yeah. And it's because we have different life experiences and abilities to tolerate the things that happen to us. And being out of control is something that can definitely trigger a traumatic response.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their different abilities to handle the stress and pain experiences of labor.
Well, and I think I wanna put a little plug for you, but also the doula profession, of creating a safe space that doesn't recreate or doesn't tip over into those past experiences can be so freeing, and the painful experience be a different trajectory because of the environment and the relational kind of space that's created, which is different than the storytelling we're talking about right now. But like, I think doulas do a good job at how do we create this space that's calm, that's safe, that really reduces the likelihood of getting taken back in our physiology to other painful events, and then start tying those stories together.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is one of the whole points of having a doula, that kind of companionship and kind of protecting the space. Yeah. So the person isn't feeling like they're coerced or they're out of control, or, the choices are being taken away, because that can lead to trauma. So the point in going on that quest too is for me, it's always been for me a part of what I do as a doula, supporting someone, is to help them find the strength in their narrative from the beginning, so that becomes what's told in the story. Yeah. Even if hard things happen, it's like, how do we find the strength? Because it's true that people actually have post-traumatic stress syndrome from birth or disorder. But people also find post-traumatic strength, post-traumatic growth. Yeah. And post-traumatic growth is a thing that can happen out of the same events.
Let's start talking more about that.
Right?
Yeah, because really, until you told me about that, I hadn't seen that in the literature.
Really?
Right. I've only focused on post-traumatic stress.
We focus on the pathology.
We do. And it's like the medical community too. Like, we're interventionists, whether it's mental health or medical health, that we're interventionists looking for problems. We're assessing not developmental trajectories, but we're assessing problems to look to intervene. And so we're experts in problems and intervention, not in health and normal biological functioning.
Yeah. Wellness and
Yeah.
building resiliency.
Post-traumatic growth, that something difficult could actually foster a trajectory of growth,
Yeah.
is, I believe that. It just blows my mind right now that haven't really read or thought about that in the literature.
I did not know that wasn't. I thought I'm just going to be talking about something you know really well, because this isn't a Pollyanna approach. This isn't saying, "Oh, just think about it differently and it will be different," because it's
Yeah, and everything will be good.
no,
Yay!
because
Yeah,
trauma is a real thing and a
right.
physiologic thing, and that's part of what your colleague Hillary
Yep.
helped to train me in narrative exposure therapy, which is a really proven and great modality for helping people move through post-traumatic stress. It's
Yeah.
used for people who've been in war situations and have true physiologic difficulties getting over this
And it can
post-traumatic
really
stress.
be taught to someone that's not necessarily an educated, licensed professional with good training and supervision.
I know. She offered to train me. I'm like, I haven't I don't have my master's degree in psychology. And she said, doesn't matter. You can learn this process and walk people through it. And so I use an adapted version of that to walk people through their birth story.
Hmm.
And the idea of narrative exposure therapy is, first a practitioner sits down with the person and kind of explains the whole process and talking through what our stress response is and window of tolerance and why you're having this, and it's not something that is not real that's
Yeah.
happening to you, these responses. And then you lay out physical representations of the things that have happened in your narrative and your life story. So you lay down a rope or a string that's your lifeline.
Yeah.
And then you think about these moments that cause this stress response in you, the trauma response. And those events are stones and you lay these like in order on your lifeline. So
Yeah.
stones represent something that was trauma.
Mm.
And you can lay flowers down for positive things that happen in life.
Ah. That's why you were out gathering bits and pieces
Mhm.
while we were in the mountains in Europe.
Yeah, I was getting bags full of stones and sticks and
You're
flowers.
picking up trauma and potential growth all in a little baggie.
Yeah, and sticks are used for aggressive events, which had to be added to this process
Mm.
after they'd interviewed young boys who had been conscripted into war situations and had perpetrated violence, and that's a
Mm.
different
So
trauma
stones
than
are about what's happened to you. Sticks are maybe what you've done to others, and
yes,
flowers
it
are
can be.
positive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and flowers are positive. So you lay those out and tell those stories and attach a story to each of those symbols. And then the person who's doing the narrative exposure therapy with you helps you tell that story again. So you focus on some of those traumatic things and see what happens in your body when you retell it.
Mm.
Because the body responds even though it's been years later. One example for this in a birth story is people who've had true trauma. Some clients that I've known can't even drive past the hospital where it happened without getting sweaty and their breathing getting shallow and their heart rate going up, and
Yeah.
they were having a body response to the location.
Yeah.
And that's truly a physiologic trauma response.
Hmm.
And so it's retelling the story in a safe place with somebody who can walk you through that response and tell that story again in real time and attach it to this time where I'm safe. It's
Yeah.
reminding your body that I'm safe now. This isn't happening now. And it kind of sets it into time and space and helps that be integrated into your life
Yeah, and
now.
that relaxing as you tell the story and experience it moves it from that trauma response, right? So when I talked about window of tolerance, you're moving it into that space where you can physiologically tolerate the conversation of something difficult and difficult experiences. So it's beautiful that you're
Yeah.
relaxing the body, breathing, being aware of what's happening.
Yeah. And then using those new skills to calm down that response.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then ending that lifeline with hopes for the future.
Mm.
And there's also a candle symbol for loss, because that's another a hard experience that isn't the same necessarily as something that happens to you.
Yeah.
It's a loss and grief are a whole different thing. But then ending with hope, and I love that too, this
Yeah.
hopeful approach. Like life is going on and there is a future, and what is that going to look like for me? So we do a version of that with, in these workshops where we do birth story processing. But the post-traumatic growth, I did look up like the Psychology Today definition
Oh,
because I
good.
was like, am I making this up in my head? Like
Well, that would be fabulous if you were, because we'll quickly publish.
well, it's something I've always believed in. And you know how I integrate that into the way I support people in birth
Yeah.
because I believe that we can help focus that narrative on the things that lead to growth rather than focusing on trauma. And when I talk about the commiseration stories, I think people get stuck there for a lifetime sometimes.
Yeah.
I've seen that in some people in our extended family who talk about who are still traumatized by their children's births. Like
Yeah.
still it's trauma. And
And
they
then,
can't really even go there.
yeah.
It's still many years later.
Well, think about this. Just an idea of what if your child becomes for you a picture of that stone? So the trauma,
Right?
actually, you don't have a stone and talking through it, but your child becomes that ritualistic object. And so, of course, you're going to have different responses in parenting.
Right.
If that is what you see when you see your child is pain, suffering.
Yeah. Well, and you hear people even verbalize that to the child, like you caused me so much suffering
Yeah.
when you were being born, or it lives on in those stories, and and that's true. There was pain,
Yeah.
but we can live there and carry it and make it bigger and make it part of our identity and our child's identity.
Right.
Or we can focus on, what did I learn about myself? What does that mean about me? And what does that mean about what I was capable of? And focus on the
Yeah.
strength building part of it, the resiliency part of it, where it becomes like, yeah, it's a hard thing I went through, but it becomes a part of my strength story, my narrative about how I gained new skills that helped me in another challenge in life,
Yeah.
rather than this thing that happened to me that traumatized me that I can't even talk about. And now I'm passing that story on to other people.
Well, and just thinking about this, I think theologically, I'll say this one thing. I want to get back to the post-traumatic growth, but are we a sin focused or are we a grace focused kind of person in the retelling of our spiritual story? So if we think about birth story, we can have some hurt in our faith story, and how do we tell it? What do we focus on? The same things you're talking about here of, am I hope focused in terms of, yes, I've been informed by this and it's important to acknowledge it and share it, and what's the trajectory going forward? Or am I stuck in this story spiritually? So anyway, you've just kind of opened a lot of connections in my head.
That's one thing you love to do in therapy. That's the whole point too, of people are stuck in one place and how do we move from there?
Getting unstuck and new possibilities. So tell me more about this highly researched, where did you get it again from? Wikipedia? No, but
it was on a psychology site. This was just looking up the definition of it. But
I might put some academic citations
you
later
should
on the website.
Go find, because I just looked this up really quick. So I'd be sure I wasn't making it up out of my head. But the definition, this is in a Psychology Today article, but it says that post-traumatic growth doesn't deny deep distress, but rather posits that adversity can unintentionally yield changes in understanding oneself, others, and the world, which is what we were talking about with a core memory. And it doesn't, it's not its own thing separate from, it doesn't deny post-traumatic stress disorder. It can coexist. So you can have real trauma, but then move towards a growth perspective. So they are saying, so people did research this phenomenon, and they described 5 categories of growth that occur over time. Survivors of trauma recognize and embrace new opportunities. So the first thing is like being open to new experiences and new opportunities, having that sort of mindset. They forge stronger relationships with loved ones as well as victims who suffered in the same way. So that's kind of the
The
deeper
joining.
connections, the
Yeah.
joining, this being understood,
Yeah.
that whole part of it can lead to growth and deeper relationships.
Yeah, bearing, and I think about that as bearing witness, like you're a witness in like in the birth process. Did you see that? Also connecting with people, being able to share
Yeah.
is a later form of that.
It's one reason a lot of the people whose births I've attended, we just have this deep relationship for life
Yeah.
because even though I don't see them in everyday life, we had this intense experience together that I got to witness
Mm,
that forms this bond,
yeah.
Um, let's see, they cultivate inner strength through the knowledge that they've overcome tremendous hardship.
Yeah.
So it's focusing on, yeah, that was hard, but like that's telling me that I'm strong, that
Right.
I
That I
overcame
can
it. I got to
navigate
the other
that.
side of it.
Yep.
And it's focusing on that. They gain a deeper appreciation for life, and their relationship to religion and spirituality changes and evolves. So that's like another layer of meaning of seeing where this fits in the whole spiritual realm as well. Like God was with me, or I learned more about who God made me to be, or the people that came around me were ministering to me,
Yeah.
out of the love of God, those kinds of things.
It also speaks to then the really necessity of safe space in a faith community, because if a faith community is also then re-traumatizing and
Hmm.
causing pain, it works against this idea of growth from the trauma experience. It actually pours on new trauma that clouds,
That just confirms like that original
yeah,
story. Yeah.
and news stories in places aren't safe.
Hmm.
Wow, that's really cool. That then it kind of shakes the structure, shakes the stuckness.
Yeah. Um, One thing that was interesting in this article, it said who's the most likely to move towards post traumatic growth instead of stress, and it was women.
Hey, interesting.
So women who've given birth, you're the kind of person that can focus on this. It
Hmm.
takes I think an intentional sort of refocusing of that
Yeah,
meaning making of what
yeah.
happened.
So with this kind of growth, is there within net? So you're doing this recollection, you're helping them tell stories through rocks, sticks, flowers, and light. Um, I think you told me there's the retelling is important as well.
Yeah, the retelling is important because they're retelling their story, but I don't think that we are attaching our meaning making to it.
Correct.
Right.
But it's like, did you see that? The
Hmm.
retelling is yes, and tell me more. You're a witness and a validating. You're not going, and this is what it means. Your baby's stubborn, or
Yeah.
kind of placing meaning. I think like with play therapy, when I do that with kids, they draw. And if I ask them, tell me more about that, there's a richness of their story. If I'm like, oh, that looks like the Sears Tower, they would say no. And then a little bit later on, they'd be like, and here's the Sears Tower. They
Mm.
kind of buy into the influence of the story, kind of
Hmm.
the dominant story from authority. So it is a danger. It is a danger of how do we help people tell their stories without intruding and um, kind of unintentionally redirecting their story, that we miss out on maybe some of this growth and strength.
Yeah, that's a really good point because that was brought up the first time I gave this presentation. Most people focus on telling their own story, but one girl at the end of the presentation said, "Well, what does this mean for how I listen to my friends' stories?" I was like, "Ooh,
It's a
that's a
great
really
question.
great
Yeah.
question," because I think we unintentionally try to make it, well, at least, or oh, I think that was, you
Yeah.
whatever. We attach our own meaning to make it feel better for them, but sometimes that's not helpful. And so
Mm-mm.
just listening,
Yeah.
and being a safe place for them to keep telling the whole story, and just by retelling it in a safe place, sometimes that in itself is helping lead to
Mhm.
that growth and that shared connection. And so it is important. And I've moved into a different way of kind of helping couples retell their story too. In my initial days as a doula, I'd heard that some people provide the couple with a birth story afterwards, like a written, this is what, I was so happy to be part of your special day, blah, blah, blah. And it is a nice gift, but I realized early on that I was writing my version of their
Right.
story.
Right.
And from a witness perspective, it's very different than what they might have been experiencing. So I moved to a very fact-based timeline that helps them structure what happened when, so they can fill in the meaning and their memories in between. So, I'll just say at 2:00 in the morning, you called me to say your water broke. At 3:00, we arrived at the hospital. At 4:00, blah, blah, blah. So it's just very fact-based and
Yeah.
time-stamped,
Yeah.
and they can fill in their own meaning and their story, and then we can process at a later time, and they can say, I felt like this happened. Does that sound right to you? And I can say, well, this is what I saw. And it helps reframe it, in a way that's accurate as to, what happened.
Yeah.
And maybe helping them with the why, because sometimes people misunderstand things that like I remember even with our first birth experience, it was long, it was hard. I pushed for a long time, and I remember seeing the table of instruments being put in the room.
Yeah.
And I remember that in my mind, I told people I was this close to a C-section because they had the instruments ready for a C-section. Well, they weren't going to do a C-section right in that room.
No.
That's the normal delivery tray
Yeah.
that's there with clamps. And it looks like a lot of sharp, scary instruments,
Yeah.
but it wasn't for a C-section.
No.
But there's a lot of things that happen in a medical context that can be misinterpreted, that it can be helpful to say, oh, no, this happened because,
Right.
and it can help change the meaning a little bit.
Yeah, normalize, like here's what's happening and why in this context.
Yeah.
And
Or
how
dads
you
can
make
say,
sense of
she
it.
about bled out. Like there was just blood everywhere. Well, it's a very normal amount, but it's not what you're used to seeing. So she
Right.
didn't, that was normal.
Yeah.
It was okay. It didn't mean anything wrong happened. But it's a lot if you're not used to seeing it. So you put a different meaning onto it.
So you really correct misperceptions, but still allow that story to form from the person, couple kind of retelling, which is different than therapy. So I think that's the space where narrative exposure therapy becomes different than therapy, because therapy, people are inviting me in to help them change the story. And there's guidelines that we have for how to do that and not do that. And that's different than you're just coming alongside, bearing witness, giving them the tools to retell their story.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, just my disclaimer, I've only gone through one training of narrative exposure therapy, and the way I use it in birth story retelling is not true to the
Right.
It's adapted.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I use the things I learned, and I think they work really well.
Yeah. I want to ask you a completely different question.
Okay.
What would you say you're an expert in? Because a lot of times you're like, you always qualify, I'm not an expert. What's the threshold of expert for you?
I don't know.
Maybe that's a conversation we'll have for another time.
Yeah.
But
that'd be a good subject.
I also think you have a lot to offer in your story and in who you are, that you bring to the table. So I want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any last thoughts?
Yeah. I'm gonna end us with a quote from
wonderful.
a book. If anybody heard this wants to go deeper into this idea of transformation in birth, I really like Britta Bushnell's book, Transformed by Birth.
Oh, yeah, so good.
You haven't read it?
I have not read it. I'm looking forward to hearing the quote, though.
But I have a lot of quotes out of that book that I love to read, because I think she's got some really strong thoughts on birth as this, core memory and identity forming event that's more than just a biological thing. But I'll just read one of the quotes that we can end with. And she says, "If it is parenthood that teaches us to be open, then birth is the beginning of that education. Birth and our inability to design it to our specifications begins the important, humbling process of surrender. We do not need yet another method for control, but rather a new paradigm that embraces the power of surrender, resilience, and growth."
I'm going to have to think about it. I like that. Surrender, resilience, and growth.
Yeah.
May that be what we focus on today.
Mm-hmm.